Hey y'all, welcome back to another doll movie review. Today we're going to be taking a look at Scaris, City of Frights from Monster High. Now, those of you who have been following this series that I've been doing where I watched the old Monster High media for the first time will know that I haven't enjoyed most of it. I didn't really like the webisodes, and most of the movies I have not enjoyed, but I am so happy to say that we finally found a winner. I finally had a good experience with the Monster High movie, and Scaris was just so much better than any of the ones that I've seen before. So, I'm actually more excited to go into this because, while I still do have some critiques because that's just what I do and that's, part of how I enjoy media, I have so many more nice things to say. It's such a good feeling when it comes to the Monster High movies. So this is going to be a bit more of a positive video, which I'm sure will also be refreshing for you guys. Before we can get into my thoughts, though, I have to give the typical disclaimers, the first of which is that these are just my thoughts. You guys are absolutely free to disagree with anything and everything that I say about Scaris, and I would love to hear your thoughts in the comments down below. And then, as always, I will be going full spoilers with this video, just because it is an older movie, and it's a lot easier for me to talk about things if I assume you understand what I'm referencing. So if you haven't seen Scaris, maybe pause the video, go watch it, and then come back so we can kind of talk about it together. And then, of course, if you guys do enjoy the video, if you could give it a like, that's super helpful to me. And then if you're new here and you enjoy your time, definitely subscribe so you can see more. And if you want to just go absolutely above and beyond, I have in my description my other social medias and then my Amazon wishlist and P.O. box. So if you want to support me in other ways, you can check those things out. But that's all for the intro stuff. Let's actually get into talking about Scaris. So I want to start out this movie review by talking about the stuff that I really did enjoy, and then we are slowly going to be getting more critical as the video goes on. That's not because I want the video to end on a bad note, but just in the organization of my mind, this seemed like the easiest way to do it, so that's what we are going to be doing. But yes, starting with the good things. First of all, I just really liked the concept of this movie in general. I like the idea that it's themed around fashion because although in this series we're focusing on the Monster High media, Monster High as a brand is primarily a fashion doll brand, and so I feel like thematically it makes tons of sense to have a movie where fashion is a big plot point. And I also thought it was really fun because there are some sequences that are almost Project Runway-esque, if you will, and I'm a huge fan of Project Runway, so that was right up my alley. This movie also gave me a lot of the same vibes that some older Bratz media did, and I do mean that as a compliment. So overall, just even going in, the concept and the premise behind this movie was one that I was really excited for, and I do think that it was executed very well. I also really enjoyed how Scaris introduced two new characters in Scalita and Genifire, because they are kind of like Claudine's peers, but also competitors, and I thought that was a really cool premise. But at the same time, when we first met them in the movie, I was really anxious that it was going to be super competitive and they were going to be at each other's throats, and it was going to be something where they had to learn to get along, which is fine. That can be a decent plot, but it's just not really what I was in the mood for going in, and so I was really happy to be wrong, because basically from the get-go, Claudine, Scalita, and Genifire are all so nice to each other. They are competing, but it's a very friendly competition. They're very supportive of each other, and they complement each other, and it was just so wholesome to watch. So it was really nice to get to see these two new characters be introduced in such a cohesive way and also such a pleasant way. Another thing I really enjoyed within Scaris is the romance aspect. Scaris is obviously a play on Paris, and so I do think that romance is a big theme in any movies concerning Paris, but I'm also just someone who likes the romance genre, and I'm a big fan fiction person, and I like to ship characters. So even if a piece of media has nothing to do with romance whatsoever, in the back of my mind, I'm always thinking, oh, would these two be a cute couple? So for me, romance is just something that goes hand in hand with literally any media, and the fact that Scaris had it built in was very nice, and I actually did enjoy it. I thought that it was pretty well executed within this movie. First of all, we have to talk about Rochelle and Garrett, who were just so cute. Out of the two of them, I do think I enjoyed Garrett more as a character, because he literally created a whole new type of rose for Rochelle. How much cuter can you possibly get? But in general, I did think that they just had really nice vibes as a couple. I was rooting for them the whole movie, and when they got to be reunited, I was so excited. It was just so awesome to watch every moment that either one of them was on screen, but then especially when they came together, I was so happy. And then the other two couples that are kind of involved in Scaris were Claude and Draculaura, and then Deuce and Cleo, and they both were also very cute. They kind of go hand in hand, because what happens within the movie is that Dracula and Cleo are part of the group that goes to Scaris first, and then Claude and Deuce are left behind, and they end up missing their girlfriends so badly that they hop on a plane and fly to a whole nother country to go see them, and like, that's commitment and that's wonderful. And then especially Deuce. Like, I'm not saying Claude and Dracula weren't cute, but especially Deuce. There was one line where he sees Cleo and he says, "My life doesn't make sense without you." And I thought I was gonna die. Like, I'm getting excited right now. It was so cute. Like, what a wholesome line. Unexpectedly, like, a good line and a good delivery. Not that I don't, like, want to see that from Monster High movies, but just with my past history of how I've felt about them, this line was so good and so wholesome, and just in general, the romance was really, really good. And then kind of tying into the thing with Deuce and Claude, I was nervous when they first were like flying to Scaris. I thought this was just going to be a subplot, and a big theme in terms of my complaints about the Monster High media thus far is that there's always a ton of subplots, and I don't feel like most of them are necessary or like they add anything to the plot. But again, I was wrong, and I was so happy to be wrong, because the boys being in Scaris actually does like affect the plot in a positive way, and they do have a purpose there, and they do actively do things that further the main storyline of the movie. So it was really cool because, yeah, I got the romance side that was fun for me, but it wasn't like just a subplot that was kind of taking up screen time. It all tied in together and all made the movie feel much more cohesive and more put together than most Monster High media usually does for me. And then lastly, for the like positivity section, I have to talk about my girl Abby, because in literally every movie that I've seen, she is like a bright spot in the dark. Of course, this time the movie was good for me overall, so she was more like a bright spot in a sea of bright spots, but she's still shown very brightly. She's just so funny. Every time she's on screen, she has great comedic timing and great one-liners, and she always makes me laugh. So even though it's not like Abby was the star of the show necessarily in Scaris, I had to include her in the video because she just always makes these movies better. But that's all I have as far as like singing the praises of Scaris. So we are going to get back into kind of more familiar territory for me and this series of videos, and we are going to start doing a little bit of critiquing. I promise it's not as bad as normal, but there are still some things I want to talk about. To kind of ease into this more critical section, I do want to start off by talking about these slightly smaller things that bothered me with Scaris, and the first one has to do with Ghoulia. So partway through the movie, Ghoulia is riding her scooter with a bunch of the other ghouls, and she crashes and the scooter gets broken, and from that point on, Ghoulia is basically just like a background character. She gets a couple of very, very small scenes, and then you see her in the background of other scenes, and that's her entire role in this movie. And in the background, or in those small scenes, she's doing like various performance arts or like actual arts, and she's presumably raising money to fix her broken scooter. She definitely ends up raising a lot of money, but I don't think we ever see her actually fix her scooter. There might be a scene where the scooter is fixed, but it's not like you get to see the process, if that makes sense. My problem with this is kind of twofold. So the first part is that this does feel like an unnecessary subplot. Subplot might be a strong word because it is just kind of background scenes, and it's not like she takes up a lot of screen time, but she just doesn't have to be doing this. Like, it felt completely unnecessary to me. And the second thing that bothers me about this is something that I think makes it feel even more necessary, and that is the types of performances that Ghoulia is doing. So she does like a mural and she's painting on a wall, she does tightrope walking, she plays the accordion, which is fine. Like, there's nothing inherently wrong with those things, but I feel like you could have put any character and plopped them in Ghoulia's place and it would have been the exact same, because it's not like within any of the other Monster High media that I've seen, at least, we have anything to show that Ghoulia is particularly artistic in the sense that she could just pick up a paintbrush and do a mural. And I don't think we ever saw her being musically inclined enough to be able to suddenly play the accordion. The tightrope thing is questionable because in some Monster High media, like the webisodes, we see zombies and therefore Ghoulia to be like a little bit less athletic, and in some, like Friday Night Frights, she can literally skate. So like the tightrope walking is plausible in terms of her capability, but I'm not really questioning her capability here. It's more that I would have loved to see, if these scenes had to be included for some reason, them actually tie into Ghoulia's personality. I do know I'm like nitpicking here, but that's because I enjoyed this movie, so I have to like get a little bit more critical, right? But But I just think it would be cool if she set up like a technology stall, because she is really, really good with technology. So maybe she's helping other tourists at Scaris with like their battery, or if their phone breaks or stuff like that. Or maybe she has like a video game center where she like sets up this little gaming booth, or she has a scene where she gets to do something with comics because she does love comics. So like the mural didn't necessarily make as much sense, but she could be drawing comic book pages. Or if you want to go like real out there, if you want her to do something artistic or musical, you could have her doing code to create like digital art or digital music, because those are things that Ghoulia is good at. And I just feel like if these scenes had to be included, they would have been enhanced if they actually tied into Ghoulia's personality, instead of just feeling like generic background scenes where it literally could have been any character or even an unnamed character in the background there. Again, I know this is like a small complaint and like a small thing to be whining about, but when a movie's good, I have to get a little more harsh, I guess. Another thing I wasn't obsessed with was Toralai's role in Scaris. In most Monster High movies, she's just kind of a mischief maker, and some of the webisodes she was like a main antagonist, but for the most part when it comes to the movies, she's kind of making mischief that is tangentially related to the villain. Like, she's helping the villain out most of the time without them even knowing. She's kind of just being rude to the main cast for the sake of being rude. And she does that in this movie, but it's on such a smaller scale that it just felt silly. I already don't think that Toralai needs to be a part of most Monster High movies, at least in the way she's written. And that is what I wrote in my notes for filming this video when I was watching Scaris. I literally said Toralai doesn't need to be in this movie, because she just doesn't add anything. She's not up to her normal level of mischief where she's like a borderline villain. She just tags along with one of the groups of characters and is vaguely irritating towards them, but it's not high stakes whatsoever. There are a few points where it seems like maybe the writers were trying to make it so that she could connect to the main cast, or she could be a bit more sympathetic a character, but that wasn't done enough for me to really feel like Toralai got any character evolution, or like anything was actually affected by that. It really just felt like she was a watered down version of herself the entire movie, and I didn't love it. And then the last relatively minor complaint that I have about Scaris involves Katrine. So I knew that Katrine was going to be part of this movie because I am watching it long after it came out, and I knew that she got a doll. So I was waiting the entire film for her to show up on screen. And she does, technically. She gets exactly one speaking line where we see her face, and most of the time when we see her, it's in these little scenes where you just see her hands and she's sketching something. Oftentimes it is what is actually playing out in the actual plot of the movie, and it kind of ties in there, which is a cool bit of animation. But other than that, she's not in the movie at all, and I was really, really disappointed to see it, just because due to the fact that she got a doll, I assumed she would be a much more important character, and I was waiting to get to be introduced to her character in the same way we were introduced to Skelita and Genafire, and it just never happened. I'm glad that she got a doll because I think it's a pretty doll, but I'm really confused about why, because it didn't seem like she was really written into the movie at all. Like, she could have easily been taken out of Scaris, and it would have been basically the exact same film. So it was just really confusing, and I wish that something more had been done with Katrine. But there is still more. I said that was my last relatively minor complaint. I have one big one. To be honest, I didn't check the timestamps specifically when I was preparing for this video, and I'm not going to go back and do it now, I'm sorry. But I think Scaris has roughly a 1 hour runtime, and about 40 to 45 minutes into that runtime, the movie is over. Like, the main plot has been concluded, there's a happy ending, everyone is celebrating, and everything is good. The movie is over. And there's just like an extra 15 minutes for no reason, or I thought for no reason. But no, the movie concludes, and then you hear Frankie's voice. And for some of you, that might be a good thing. Y'all might be Frankie fans, and that's great. But for me, I was filled with dread. And then we get a title card at the end of the movie, because there's a short film at the end of Scaris. And I'm using this term short film very nicely, like I'm trying to be generous, but I'm so irritated. I tried to watch the short film, and I'll talk about what made me stop, because I didn't finish it. I couldn't do it. So the short film starts with all of the characters sitting in a cafe. They're like preparing to pack up and leave Scaris and head home. And we see something weird. And I honestly thought that it was just something weird that I could push through and I could deal with. But it did bother me. So what we see is that Claudine's design book, where she sketches all of her fashion designs, is like moving around and has become a sentient creature. And Claudine explains that the more she drew in it, the more of herself she poured into this book, the more it came alive. Very literally, which, haha, it's a good joke. No, it wasn't like that in the entirety of the actual proper Scaris movie that I signed up to watch. This was just a book. And you can say all you want that it happened later and that Claudine explains that it's because she poured more of herself into this book that it came alive and like that must have just happened after the events of Scaris proper. I don't care. If that works for you as like a justification for why this is happening, that's great and I'm happy that you get to have a peaceful mind. I don't. I was so angry about this and I hated it so much because it just doesn't make sense to me and I was really, really frustrated by it. But like I said, I thought this was just something about the short that I could push past and survive. No, because the whole short is about this stupid sentient book because it like runs away from Claudine and it gets on little hijinks and the plot is about some of the characters having to chase after this book. And as soon as I realized that the entire short was about this, I quit. I gave up because I had had such a good time watching Scaris and I was so happy to finally enjoy Monster High Media. And the second that title screen popped up for this stupid short, I was instantly in such a worse mood. And I said it earlier in this video, I frequently complain with Monster High movies that there are so many subplots and little stuff like that that the time invested in those subplots could be better used fixing the movie because the subplots are almost always unnecessary and I would rather that time go to fixing the problems in the movie. With this, I wish that these 15 minutes that were used for this subplot would have been tacked onto Scaris so that you could have made a good movie even better. Like imagine if those 15 minutes were used to introduce Katrine. To be fair, maybe they were. Maybe she is introduced in the short, but I didn't watch it. And frankly, I don't think that that changes my complaints about it because there's no reason to have a character important enough to get a doll and have her introduced in a short film instead of the actual movie. So imagine that that time was used to introduce Katrine. Or even if that wasn't going to be the case for some reason, imagine that that extra time was used to invest into Skeleta and Genefire, the other new characters, or even Garrett. Like it would have been so cool to get to flesh out those characters even more because I liked them when they were on screen, but it's a short movie anyway. Like Scaris is not a long film, and so it would have been awesome for those extra 15 minutes to be used in the actual movie so that we could see more of their personalities develop, but instead we got a sentient book and I'm mad about it. I am fully aware that I did say that I liked Scaris more and that this was going to be a more positive video, and yet I still somehow managed to basically end the video by ranting. Not on purpose, I'm just passionate about these things, but I really do want to reiterate, despite my complaints and despite the flaws that it did still have, because it's not a perfect movie, I really enjoyed Scaris. Like, it is so much better, so many leagues above the other Monster High media that I have consumed thus far. It's so much better to the point where even if I hate every other movie that I still have yet to watch, this whole series and this whole, like, amount of time that I've invested watching the Monster High media will be worth it because at least now there's one. There's one that I like, there's one that I can look back on and say, hey, I felt attached to that Monster High media and I'm happy about that. So it's worth it even if I hate everything else. That's how good Scaris was. So like, I know I'm ranty. That's just who I am. I promise. It was so good. I really did enjoy it. And I'm really hoping that I get to have this experience with more movies in the future. Like, I'm hoping that Scaris is kind of a turning point and I get to enjoy more of the media in the future. The next movie that I'm going to be watching is 13 Wishes. So I guess don't spoil anything, but let me know in the comments if you think that I'm going to like that now that you know what I liked about Scaris. Maybe that will give you guys a better idea of like what Monster High might do that I would enjoy. And definitely be looking forward to getting to see that movie review when it comes out. But yeah, like I said earlier, I would love to hear what you thought about Scaris and also what you think about my thoughts, which is a funny sentence to get to say, but it would just be really cool to talk with you guys about it in the comments down below. Otherwise, I hope you guys enjoyed the video. I hope you have a lovely rest of your day or your night, whatever it might be, and I will catch you all in the next one. Bye, guys!